I'm Caden, the industry-leading expert in Onshape automation, FeatureScript, and integrations. But today, I'm going to be taking a first look at a new CAD that has emerged on the scene, Zoo. Zoo has piqued my interest for a few reasons. Most notably is that it touts the ability to create CAD models through code, something that I have found to be very useful when using Onshape and FeatureScript. Second is that it has both a browser-based CAD client and a desktop one, but more on that later. Lastly, it's built on a new CAD engine. Parasolid, which is the engine that Onshape, SolidWorks, and others run on, first came out in 1978. The engine that Zoo has built claims to be optimized for modern GPUs and cloud architecture, which should hopefully lead to better performance. So far, that all sounds very promising, but how does it shape up? When you first sign up, you're given the options of a desktop or cloud-based client. The cloud client is still in a test release, so while I did play around with it, I'm going to focus on the desktop client. Download and install was incredibly simple. I think I was up and running in under 5 minutes, and I am using the free version, so I didn't have to go through any purchasing or licensing. I can't speak to that process. Starting up the client, you're greeted with what looks like a fairly normal, albeit minimalist, retro-inspired CAD interface. One of the interesting things to note is that the KCL Code editor for design is open by default. There is a typical feature tree you can click through to edit the model, and doing so updates that code window. And this is where I hit my first grievance. The feature dialogues are tedious. It requires a lot of clicks to add any feature. You can only do one step of the dialogue at a time, so editing is a bit of a pain. Their extrude feature only has 2 inputs, but imagine what this process is going to be like when all of the possible options are available. Now, back to this code editor. This is what really caught my attention originally. FeatureScript is a fantastic part of Onshape, and one of the things I like to talk about is how all features in Onshape are made with FeatureScript. It benefits from not being an afterthought. This is something that excites me about Zoo. There are some noticeable differences between Onshape and Zoo Design Studio. FeatureScripts are self-contained programs. They act as a single feature of the model. Adding features to the feature tree builds up the model. There is a view code option, but it's read-only. Onshape is obfuscating a lot of the code generation process. The expectation is that you will create your model as you would with any other CAD, and FeatureScript is just a tool you can use to solve problems and make life easier. By contrast, Zoo Design Studio is expecting you to be writing code to make your models, to the point that some functionality is currently only available as written code. Reusing code is an important part of being efficient as a software developer. In Onshape, FeatureScripts can be easily inserted into any model you'll need. In the KCL language, you can import other files as you would any kind of library in most common languages. There is a limitation here that they have to be in the same directory, which could be a bit annoying to scale a library for larger companies. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I have some nitpicks about the KCL language, mostly points of personal preference, but the oddest thing is that the language doesn't have any kind of loops. No for loops, no while loops. Why? Because FeatureScripts are compartmentalized, making features work together is not straightforward. You're fairly limited in what processes can happen mid-feature, how data is passed from feature to feature, etc. A feature can't know what inputs were used in another feature. But in KCL, the entire model is a single file. It is possible to have model workflows that aren't exactly possible in Onshape, but those would be corner cases. I want to summarize a few of the things about Zoo Design Studio that I like and find interesting. While I generally don't think a file-based CAD system is the way of the future, KCL files are plain text, which is good. They are deterministic, so there is some interesting potential there for automatically generate entire CAD files. Plain text files means that they can be managed with a Git style branching version control if you use something like Git. The files are going to be lightweight and easy to share. An interesting side effect is that you can just copy the contents of a file and send it to someone. Zoo Design Studio is available as both a desktop and cloud client. This is something that people have been asking Onshape for a while, and I don't think is going to happen. But we're also going to stick a pin in that for a moment. There is a lot of potential for automation. The combination of code-defined CAD and plain text files lowers some barriers for automation. I am sure that Zoo will be able to solve some very unique problems that other CADs would make somewhat more difficult. Now, I think these problems are going to be niche, but it's always good for your market position to have something that nobody else has. Machine learning and AI could really make use of this. While the files are just plain text on your computer, I was able to share a file through the cloud version with a link share. I just click a button and I got a link, which would have been really cool if it worked. Testing it resulted in a spinning wheel forever and the file never loaded. Editor Caden here. When I went to get the footage of this specific issue, there had been an update to Zoo and it was replaced by a different issue. This came up a lot during filming, so a lot of the issues I describe are actually going to be replaced with other footage of a similar problem that plagued the same feature. Within the first hour of using Zoo, I managed to either crash or soft lock the program more than 3 times. I had to quit out and restart. I also managed to corrupt one of my designs unintentionally, and I wasn't able to recover it. There was no undo redo path that brought the file back to its original state, and I still have no idea how I did it. The user interface I found to be a little difficult. I have had a lot of difficulty with selections, especially with just the default planes zooming in and out. It might just be me, but that could be improved. Zoo claims to support various neutral format imports, but I ran into issues and wasn't able to import some of the STLs that I tried. I dug into the issue and documentation says that any brep service won't import, which is a pretty serious limitation. But it also wasn't clear when my import failed that this was the problem. I also tried importing a KCL file into another one, and I ran into a bug trying to transform it. Zoo has a somewhat limited feature set, and I was surprised at how many issues I was able to find. It is early days for Zoo. I'm going to assume these will get resolved. These aren't coming across as huge fundamental problems, but I still do have concerns. Most of my concerns are separated into 2 major categories: things that are missing and architectural choices. Something I've noticed while using Zoo is that when you open a file, the entire file seems to go through a rebuild. Because it's a purely text-based file, I don't think there's any kind of caching. When files are small, it's not much of an issue. It loads quickly enough. But designs get big, like really big. How is that going to be for performance? How long will a file take to open in the real world? Time is money, and the pain of opening slow files is what's driving companies to switch CAD platforms. In this day and age, opening a file and having to go get a coffee is a lot less acceptable. In my testing, the load times were longer than you would expect. The second big thing I noticed was that what I thought was a bug, but Zoo had connection issues and wouldn't do anything, which I found weird for a desktop client. But then I dug into it and found that the desktop client requires a constant internet connection because the commute is done server-side. In my opinion, that defeats the purpose of a desktop client. The rest of my concerns are things that I would consider critical features that are missing. These are what I consider the bare minimum to be a useful CAD that can provide value to a company, which allows them to go from a concept to a design to a product. Zoo doesn't seem to have the concept of a part. It's just files. Likewise, there's no assemblies. Sure, an assembly is just a bunch of parts in one place together, and you can do that by importing multiple files together, but an assembly is more than just all the files in one place. assemblies require things like a bill of materials. But how can you get a bill of materials without metadata? As far as I could tell, there's no way to give a file any kind of metadata. No part numbers, descriptions, materials. I guess you could offload all of that work into a PDM or PLM system, but those are also not products offered by Zoo. I want to iterate something. GitHub is not a PDM system, and managing CAD files is just as important as creating them. Maybe this is all moot, because you won't be able to manufacture anything that you design. There's no drawings tool. Drawings are slowly going to become a thing of the past, but today they're still required in order to pass critical design information to manufacturing. And Zoo has no way to make drawings. You aren't completely stuck here. You could use another tools, but I think it's important to highlight that you still need to go between two systems for this step of the process. The silver lining here, though, is that Zoo has a lot of potential here to really innovate in the CAD drawing space. Taking a step back to the actual modeling process, don't expect to model through the interface. At first, I thought a bunch of critical functionality just wasn't implemented in Zoo, things like splines. But I had to dig through the documentation to find that you can use splines. They're just only available through coding. If KCL is why you picked Zoo and writing code to make models, this might be a non-issue. But I think coders are the minority of design users, and this is a hurdle to using Zoo. In the category of nitpick, there's no rollback bar, there's no suppression, it's not easy to edit specific portions of models. You have to fiddle around a little bit with commenting lines of code out. Likewise, there's undo, but not a redo, and the undo depth I wish was greater. I tried out the text-to-CAD feature, and I couldn't really get it to work. At least nothing usable came out of it. I wouldn't count on it at this time. So what does this all cost? Yep, it's $3,800 per year. That is more than Onshape or SolidWorks. Now, my complaint here isn't that a CAD shouldn't cost $3,800 a year. It's what you're getting at that price. It isn't a lot. When stacked up against other CADs, I'm curious who would pick Zoo over the other options. The only way I see this being worth the price is if text-to-CAD or KCL are an important requirement for your process. If you're a researcher or you have some unusual automation requirements. But now, I do need to stress, it is early days. Onshape released with a limited feature set and spent years catching up, and is now, in many ways, way out in front. I don't see why Zoo couldn't do the same. Something that I've heard said by multiple people at Onshape and PTC is this phrase that I really, really like. It's, we don't sell on promises. The product you're buying is the product as it is today. So, in conclusion, there is something really interesting here. Only time will tell where it goes. I'd love to hear from people who are using Zoo as their main CAD platform and what their experiences are like. Competition in the space is always good, and I want to see where Zoo goes.